Hello, my friends. Welcome to Christ and Coffee. Today, I get the pleasure of turning the tables and introducing Haig Kherlopian, or should I say Dr. Reverend Haig Kherlopian.
You can call me Haig. It's fine.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
What should we go by today?
Just Haig. It's fine.
Haig? Oh, Haig. Okay, Haig. And we are going to chat about the Internet of Things. And you actually have spent a lot of time last couple years dissecting, researching, understanding all of the themes around the Internet of Things, specifically related to ministry and how to reach millennials and get them to church at the end of the day. So
thanks for having me on. It's good to be here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it's great to have this opportunity right now to talk about kind of the research I did regarding using social media specifically to impact millennials to know and apply Christian principles. And with that, a lot of discoveries took place. I was trying to figure out why people aren't reading the Bible. And then I was trying to figure out why Christians aren't reading the Bible. And then I was trying to figure out why people aren't reading. And it's just this digital age that we're in. Both of us are millennials, and we were like a guinea pig generation because we're the first generation to grow up with digital technologies. We're digital natives. It was 1985 where more movies were checked out of the library than books. And we are more and more in a culture where we're reading less, but consuming more and more snippets. And how we kind of digest our information also affects how we think, how we worship. There's this big correlation with how we consume media affects how we communicate. And literally our brains are shaped by it.
Yeah. And then as a pastor, I mean, we were in Manhattan for how many, 10 years? What would you say one of the biggest challenges for you was? Because, I mean, when you first started, that wasn't the case, right? You weren't preaching to millennials.
Right. I was mostly revitalizing an elderly church where a lot of the generational divides are even bigger because of him. Because if so I was a mainline Protestant church is what I took over. The church is 128 years now. And a lot of the Protestant traditions stem from the printing press. Martin Luther became Martin Luther. He became the first media figure because of the technology of the printing press. Before that, the church was more about just going to church, seeing icons and pictures and just knowing stories, more narrative. But when people had access to books, literacy went up. One of the big legacies of the Protestant Reformation is the fact that people got literate and were able to have the Bible in their hands. And the translation that Luther worked on and his writings became mainstream because of the technology of the printing press. So I say all that because the tradition I inherited as a congregational church and many of these struggling mainline Protestant churches, their customs, their traditions stem from 500 years ago, where everything was shaped around the technology, the printing press. And what do I mean by this? Look, you have hymnals, it's a book. You have bulletins, it's a piece of paper. The Bible, it's tangibly in their hands. Everything that was created was shaped with sheet music, with reading the Bible for themselves, the study, and it's all possible because of the mainstreamness of print. Now we live in an era where we don't like to have anything on a piece of paper. We don't even like to carry cash, for crying out loud. Everything is digital. So what does that do to church? What does that do to the way we worship God and express it? So literally the churches that are thriving or growing tend to be the ones that are newer, that were planted more with the digital space. They were the ones using the TVs, the cameras, the mics beforehand, and they're the ones who tend to kind of succeed because they planted themselves with the digital technologies of even microphones. We take that for granted. Before then, one of the reasons why a lot of mainline old school preaching sermons where you had this orator who would enunciate words and kind of like preach the word and pronounce words, like we don't need to do any of that right now. I have a microphone.
Yeah.
It's a kind of becomes theatrics at that point. But back then, it was important to enunciate and speak and kind of have pauses to project. So all these things are things that we don't really understand, but they do shape not only how we think, how we receive data, but also how we worship God.
Yeah. But what about, I understand that these shifts have taken place and this is the way the newer generation is understanding it and taking in information. But what would you say is the challenge now with, let's say, our parents' generation? How do we, because a lot of that generation resists change. So how do we kind of figure out a balance between the two so that, we still are doing ministry with the generation before us?
So the interesting,
including them and making sure that they feel it's a collaborative, church versus just always thinking about the future.
Right. And you want to celebrate
not just the future, but like the millennial generation.
So the interesting thing about the pandemic was it kind of accelerated all the trends that I was researching. And it just happened verbatim. Like everything that I was writing about, this was right as TikTok was happening. I predicted pretty much a lot of my conclusions was TikTok short reels is going to be the best way to communicate.
Yeah.
A lot of the trends that have happened were accelerated by the pandemic. And it was interesting. Right when the pandemic happened, all the younger generations were able to jump on Zoom right away.
Right.
It took some time. They needed some coaching, the older generations. But by the midway pandemic, you had Zoom fatigue from the younger people who were tired of, being on Zoom from work to this.
Yeah.
And other people, the elderly generation, they got comfortable using it. So I think part of it is coaching and being patient.
Yeah.
But I think people in general don't like change.
Yeah.
And the change is just getting more and more rapid, whether we like it or not, with AI technology coming around, VR technology coming around. We are on the cusp of even more rapid changes coming about.
Yeah.
And it's important for the church to not be scared of it, but to be aware of it. And I think the pandemic taught us nothing at the end of the day is going to substitute meeting in person, breaking bread, praying with people in person. In fact, if Christianity only becomes about just data and knowing things, then it's in trouble. And I think some churches are in trouble because we turn Christianity pretty much digesting information about the Bible, but it's a calling you're supposed to live out with people. It's something you need to celebrate with people, and you can't really become a Christian unless you apply the teachings of Jesus. You follow him, not just know about him. And that's the key here with the technology. It'll never substitute actual discipleship. It'll never substitute actual application of doing the Christian things.
Yeah.
It'll teach you the knowledge of it, but it won't substitute the action of it.
Yeah. So the digital tool, they're all tools, all these different tools that we now have access to. So if people are resistant to change though, then do you think the coaching aspect becomes more important, and then it forces us to even create relationships between the two generations?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So there's something there too, I think.
Exactly. So all the people who grew up with print media, like the newspaper versus the digital, for example, in that 500 years, you have people who are able to retain information better. They have deep learning, deep knowledge.
Yeah.
Our attention spans and Gen Zs and Gen Alpha, it's constant, quick information. So a lot of the data shows that they're good at short-term memory, but their deep learning, their long-term memory suffers because they don't just sit with one text or one video they watched over and over again. They jump to video to video to video to video to video. It's nonstop. So there's definitely every generation has certain contributions to give us. And sometimes technology shapes generations, but at the end of the day, like you're saying, there needs to be some cross understanding.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing of the church. It should be multi-generational.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. What do you think are some ways to being able to do that? Creating, more of that.
Again, at the end of the day, technology is not going to substitute eating together, praying together, modeling.
Yeah.
You need to be modeled Christianity. You can't just know about it. I know that exercise is good, but if someone's not teaching me proper form and showing me how it's done, I'm not going to be able to live out my faith. Yeah. And ideally, you want people who are older in the faith modeling Christianity, not just telling you about Christianity. You could Google search what Christianity is about,
Right.
but you can't Google search a model of what this looks like in my respective family and career and location. We need mentorship.
Yeah.
And if we don't have mentorship, we don't have discipleship. And if we don't have discipleship, we don't have proper Christianity. And what this has all done is it's exposed the cracks of church. And I think we're realizing something's off about how certain models of church were operating, because it wasn't discipleship, modeling, relationship.
Yeah.
It was more just entertainment, knowledge. And that's important, but that's a slice of the faith.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the way Jesus taught, I mean, he was just going around talking through parables, teaching, modeling. That's exactly how, he taught people how to do church and become like him. So what if we did that at church? Just where we created a mentorship program. What if churches did that? Do they do that?
Yeah, some do. It just, you have to pray into right connections, but I think that's huge. Of course, I think that's what's needed.
Part of the discipleship program.
Yeah, and just using another word for it, mentorship versus discipleship. As long as that person is not just modeling, just how to be a good parent or person in this career, but also this is what it means to apply these principles of Jesus Christ. Because ultimately, it's imitation is the key, not just digesting information. Imitation, not information.
And accountability, right?
Right.
So I think everyone should have a coach, a mentor, a coach, someone they just kind of like check in with.
Yeah.
That's been really important for us, right?
Yeah. And I think sometimes older generations feel intimidated because of the technological edge younger generations may have, but that doesn't mean they have character. That doesn't mean they have, the ability to endure and to know what's right through experience and application. So I think sometimes there needs to be this humility that's lacking, because millennial culture is notorious for being entitled, for being weak, and there's some data to that. That's true, but there's also, we're part of this experiment where we're the first generation to grow up with these technologies that are going to impact the world, and there hasn't been a communication revolution like this in 500 years.
Wow. Yeah. So what would you say were some of the things you learned that kind of shocked you the most during your research?
So one of the main things was the nominal Christian benefited the most from a lot of the ministry I was doing at the time. They're Christian enough to click the link, but they're not Christian enough to maybe attend church.
Interesting.
A lot of people are pro-Jesus, but they may not be pro-church. There's a lot of hurt, hypocrisy. So there's different reasons why people don't go to church, but especially within, cultures like the Armenian and other cultures where people tend to be, Christian by culture at the very least. They're not going to be poo-pooing Jesus Christ or anything like that. So the people who are Christian enough to click the links tend to benefit the most.
Yeah.
That was an interesting find. Other findings was, I do think people want to apply Christian principles, but like you're saying, they need modeling, they need mentorship, they need help and some guidance on what does it look like to actually forgive someone?
Yeah.
What does it actually look like to walk in the light and forgive and confess sin? Or what does it look like to pray for someone even, or to pray, period?
Yeah.
So that needs to be modeled. You could read the Lord's Prayer, but if you don't have someone praying with you till you get the Lord's Prayer, then it's not going to be as effective.
Yeah. But another thing I think we were talking about is millennials love experiences. Right. They're very hands-on. They want to experience something. They want to feel like all the touching points. So if they are into experiences, then isn't there something about experiencing prayer, experiencing reading the word together in person? So there's that aspect of it too, right? So we just have to think of ways. Basically, you're saying we have to just be more innovative and get creative with how we go about.
Yeah. So just creating the space for spiritual disciplines to take place is as simple as that sounds. We don't have to reinvent any wheel. It's just we need to apply it properly, and just creating spaces where people could feel, like they're experimenting or they're in a workshop, but it's a spiritual discipline or a spiritual practice. That's huge.
Yeah.
Because again, I think the model of church with the print era is just information. Information is fine, but without application, there's no transformation.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. What about, would you say with let's say the Orthodox Church, where it's
sensory overload.
exactly.
So there's a throwback and an appreciation to that. So I guess there's two types of thinking. There's more narrative thinking, and then there's more logical, rational constructs. So with the print era, where you get modernity, and the scientific revolution, it's very logical, deep thinking. Prior to that, it was very more narrative. This is the story. The liturgy shows the story. It's something you have to participate and learn. So the Orthodox Church, there's incense where there's the smells of the church.
Almost can be theatrical.
It's theatrical. It feels like you're experiencing everything, and you're invited into the story of Jesus Christ, and it culminates with the eating of the body and the drinking of the wine. It's great as long as you understand what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of things I will nitpick about the liturgy itself, but for the most part about it, I love it.
Yeah.
But it's more about what's happening.
Yeah, and what's being said, right?
Yeah.
They use the formal language of Kherlopian. Yeah.
So
in the Armenian context, yeah.
So I mean, the Protestant Reformation comes in. All right, what does this mean? What does the Bible actually say?
Right.
Let's logically worship God with our logical mind, not just accept it. But it doesn't have to be an either or. It could be experience, logic, tradition, and experience. So with the era we're in the movie theater. We're in the movie era. We love stories again.
Yeah.
I don't think people are as logical as they used to be, which is dangerous because we're post-Christian, postmodern, and right to just say there's things right and wrong is bad.
Right.
So whenever new technology is introduced, it tends to take away something of the past. So like example, the car, it accelerated our ability to move. What does that really mean? It gave us literally stronger legs to. So technologies tend to do that. They tend to exaggerate a sense. Whether it's a TV, it changes the way we see things. A microscope, a telescope, it helps us see.
Yeah.
It helps our sense of sight. So technologies ultimately accelerate senses. But when a new technology is introduced, an old technology is taken away. So when the telephone was introduced, Morse code was kind of diminishing.
Yeah.
But now we're going back to text messages.
Yeah.
And it's like a throwback to hieroglyphics. People are just speaking in emojis. So there's always a back and forth.
Yeah.
And it's important to be aware that each generation has some sort of technological way of communicating that needs to be
like a
remembered.
Yeah.
Touch point or an art. Yeah.
Yeah. But if there's always, I'm kind of concerned about our kids' generation.
Right.
When everything's becoming so digital.
Right. Literally, our son was able to
Yeah.
pick YouTube videos before he could walk. That's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you feel about that? Well, I mean, just in general, and then in the context of doing church and becoming a part of a church body.
I guess, again, it comes back to modeling, I think. Modeling the faith in the home, and nothing will substitute that. Nothing substitutes that, period. And, but yeah, I mean, they're going to deal with virtual reality. Some of the data I did was on virtual churches. Now it's becoming a thing.
Yeah.
But just to stress the importance of community, breaking bread. Actually, you can't love people if you're sitting on your couch.
Right. Yeah. But I'm also concerned about levels, just the skill of communicating.
And that's a good point.
Right?
What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, so many times you meet kids and, younger than us, and there's so much insecurity on just having a normal conversation in person. There's so much anxiety. You just feel it because they're just so used to texting and doing something behind a screen versus having one-on-one, face-to-face, eye contact conversation that you sense the nervousness, the anxiety, the nerves.
Yeah, and I think there was an interesting, just on that point, I remember when I was single, there was a certain cutoff about receiving a phone call or a text message to be asked out.
Yeah.
And it was like Gen Z definitely, earlier millennials preferred to be asked out on a text message. And people older were like, you better phone call me if you take this seriously.
Yeah.
So just like that little way of communicating is fascinating. And
Yeah.
I get frustrated because like someone like my dad, he'll call me
Immediately.
I'm like, you could just text message me or, something more efficient.
Yeah.
But that's me just being disrespectful of
Yeah.
that person's voice, for example.
Yeah.
So each generation has some sort of way they like to communicate.
Yeah.
And then even with social media, it's gotten crazier.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at generations and media platforms, like Gen Z is all about TikTok. Millennials are more about Instagram, Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Gen X is Twitter.
Yeah.
And each generation seems to have a different social media platform in which they communicate.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is going to mean for our kids. But
Yeah.
regardless of how they communicate with technology, they better learn how to communicate face to face.
Yeah.
And be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And I hope schools are modeling this, and not just, again, giving them information.
Nodding his head. Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts, Javiz, on all this?
I don't know.
You're the tech guy in this whole shindig.
Yeah, a lot of it, I don't know. It just feels overstated. Like,
Yeah.
because the whole YouTube thing, like I feel like that has more taken over like what TV is.
Right. You're no longer a couch potato. You're a YouTube potato.
Pretty much. Like it's like because I don't
Couch
watch TV
potato,
anymore. It's
guys, YouTube
basically I
is
found
so
like
much-
programming on YouTube that completely has replaced
Yeah.
like entertainment in that regard.
Mhm.
And I'll still watch like TV shows on whatever like Prime or Netflix or the DVDs and Blue. That's the thing. I tend to prefer to buy the media that I like,
Mm.
and that way I have it. It's not able to be altered.
Yeah.
And because that's the thing, like I have a concern with is that they're altering media now.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a whole another layer. But we grew up with the idea of we had to wake up for Saturday cartoons to watch our TV shows. Our kids could watch instantly whatever they want to watch immediately.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of impatience
Mm-hmm.
and immediacy for what they want, which could lead to a lot of selfishness.
Yeah.
But yeah, you would think what you're saying, Jabe, is about the scent, like kind of what you're hinting at. I think it's weird. You would think with what the technology it would burst open the doors for free speech and whatnot, but now it seems like things can be even more manipulated and censored.
Yeah, it's like taking away like artistic creativity, actual thought, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's all being manipulated, and that's where I have the concern. Yeah, it's just that's
Yeah. And then there's this whole cancel culture.
Right.
Which kind of leads into the whole like media now being changed.
Yeah.
Like old works are either edited or they put like a trigger warning at the beginning of it, and it's just like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's like walking on eggshells constantly.
yeah. There's no.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to the root of the Protestant Reformation is they were trying to censor the Bible for the layperson not to understand for themselves.
And that's kind of starting to happen now.
Yeah.
Like there's new versions of the Bible being translated where it's like, oh, it's more politically correct. Or just countries are straight up like, here's our version of the Bible, and this is the one that we consider to be accurate. And it's like changed all context and like takes out like the actual validity of it and whatnot. So
yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just like everybody can be put on blast in a matter of seconds.
Right.
Yeah. If I don't agree, I could put you on blast in a matter of seconds.
Right.
For thousands of people to listen, see. So what are your thoughts on that? So that's like the back.
Yeah, I mean the philosophy of censorship of having this weird religiosity to yourself, regardless of the label of it, is nothing new. It's just the way we do it now is put on blast, like you said. I think it's kind of like cyber Pharisees and cyber Sadducees. If you go against whatever credo they have, and you're an outlier to that system of thought, there's this desire to just cancel and condemn and to shut off an opposing voice. And sometimes when that happens, the truth gets lost because oftentimes the crowd could be manipulated with media.
Mm-hmm.
That's always happened.
Yeah.
Now it's happening on a different scale, but also it's freeing in many ways too if people are able to diversify where they consume media.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting where that plays out, but I don't think just because we have the internet, we're free from that manipulation. We just got to be aware that whichever new technologies emerge, people will try to take advantage of it, and that's just human nature. The powerful want to be powerful, and they can if they could control what's being put out there and whatnot. But yeah, these are all concerning things for our kids. But I think at the end of the day, we have to model it and just be aware of the technology, not be fearful of the new technologies that they may grow up in, but give them the confidence and the love to strip away their fears, to empower the Christ level of love that's required for them to be made in the image of God, and just to kind of focus on the truthful things, and to just say there's right and wrong, I think is important to say these days.
Yeah.
But this desire to cancel people, I think it's connected to when Jesus says, like, you shouldn't have hate in your heart for anyone, even if you disagree with them. Because what's murder ultimately? He says, if you have hatred in your heart for a brother, you're like a murderer.
Mm-hmm.
Murder is ultimately, I wish this person didn't exist.
Mm-hmm. And
that's dehumanizing the person altogether. And I think when we cancel people, we're saying, we wish this person doesn't exist. We wish this voice doesn't exist. We wish this perspective doesn't exist. And what that leads to is hate, ultimately, and a losing of the truth. So hopefully what we're doing at a podcast, we're creating conversations. So we'll bring people with different theological leanings.
Yeah.
And kind of, hear what they're saying and kind of learn from each other. And the danger with social media is you get to pick what you want to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the luxury of hearing opposing sides, because you could literally just stick to your own little tribe and you think the whole world is that small, when in reality it's not. It's actually multifaceted. But because of your algorithm that you're fed on your social media feed, based on what likes you have, you could literally stay in your own little worldview and not learn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the crazy thing about this open technology, is you can be limited in your knowledge, not the other way around, depending on how you use it. Technology is ultimately neutral.
Yeah.
How it's used is whether or not it's good or evil.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts, Jabez, on that?
Not really. not on that. Like, that's pretty much.
Yeah, it's like a double-ended sword
Yeah.
with everything. Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this whole tech and church?
I think one of the biggest things that, especially for our kids' generation, is just this constant, with everything being alike, how many likes you have, how many friends you have. Everyone's value is based on these things, and they really base it off of these things, and they're all lies. They don't mean anything. These people don't care about you most of the time, especially if you're a brand or if you're an influencer or whatever. So it's just creating that, like you said, how do we model that? How do we break that train of thought? How do we make sure and instill the Christian principles and what Christianity says and where they,
Yeah.
So.
Because if it's true, it's going to be true regardless of what technology is there, what culture is there. It should last. And it has been lasting for 2,000 years. But sometimes the application of the Christian principles have not been there.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean what Jesus taught isn't true. It is true. It's just we got to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the beautiful thing about being a Protestant is this flexibility of taking the unchanging truths of the Gospels and the biblical truths to the changing times, versus trying to capture the times into a time capsule.
Mm-hmm.
So as language evolves, as technology evolves, we're able to adapt, but not be adaptive in the principles of right and wrong.
Mm.
And that's, at the end of the day, what a good Protestant should do is acknowledge there is truth, and take those truths to the changing times. And whatever that looks like for Generation Alpha, our kids, we will not be scared or hesitant, but we'll be flexible, but also firm in what is right and wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But all this is interesting because we're in the middle of a communication revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think AI and VR is going to be like the next wave of it. And this is a wake-up call for churches to actually practice what Jesus preaches, not just preach what he practices, but actually have to practice it. Because only in the practice does a transformation happen.
Yeah. But have you seen these new technologies where you can just write up any sentence, and then they can make you sound smarter and more articulate?
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I find that it's interesting with plagiarism for our kids.
Yes.
I mean, we got yelled at for using the calculator, and I'm like, and we'd always be like, why do I have to learn this? And then math teacher would be like, you need to learn how to reason, and there's that deep knowledge that they're kind of right, but
there was always that thing. It's like you're not gonna have a calculator in your pocket all the time,
but now you
do
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think Chat GPT is just a very synthesized Google search, if you think about it.
It really is, because you kind of tend to see the pattern in Chat GPT. Chat GPT won't really give you anything that's like, if you're writing a story, like it'll give you like a consensus of an idea that you can work off of. But in terms of like an actual like satisfying story of like conflict and whatnot, it doesn't really do much in that, unless I haven't played with it enough.
Yeah.
But it always seems
ones.
it always seems like it just does kind of the same thing over.
But it's gonna get better. That's the thing.
Getting better and better.
We'll see.
By the time they're in high school,
I feel like it only get, because current AI can only go as far as it's programmed for, until like quantum computing becomes a thing.
Yeah, that'll be the next wave.
That's when it gets really scary. It's when it has unlimited bandwidth, because right now it can only do so much.
Yeah.
And I think all this is going to be probably my first book I'll write. It will be on the mind, body, and spirit of the Christian walk, because the technology will always affect the mind. But I think the physical aspects, the spiritual aspects can never be substituted with technology. If that's not modeled correctly in the church, and church is just about knowing things and being entertained, then that Christianity that's not sustainable. That's going to be substituted with the technologies. But the transformative piece is walking after Jesus, spiritually be connected to the Father in Jesus Christ, walking with the Spirit, and in that, no algorithm is going to substitute that. It can't. AI is never going to feed me. AI is never going to connect me to the Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting. I don't know what plagiarism is going to look like. And what school's gonna look like?
Yeah.
Not just what church will look like. What is school gonna look like for our kids?
Yeah. I mean, even during the pandemic, how many churches closed down? Right. There's that, and then after the pandemic, how many people completely stopped going to church? They're doing church from home,
right? Which
is not doing church.
Or they transfer their membership. And that's most church growth that has happened has just been church transfers.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is I moved to like Florida and Texas, and it's called transfer growth.
Yeah,
which is not legitimate, which is not growth in the like people were converting sense of the word.
Yeah,
that's still a smaller percentage.
Yeah, but then there's been a huge shift of house church models, right?
Right.
So that's been a good thing that's come out of it.
Right.
What is that? What is a house church for people that don't really
keeping it smaller and simpler? I think a lot of people appreciate their small groups more than the mega church they were part of, and it's just like, why do we place the label of the small group not being church? So and what does Jesus' church model look like? Because ultimately church should be Christians. The word church is a collection of Christians, not a building, not a space. So I think you could utilize technologies to learn, but at the end of the day, having a smaller group where you get to share life, tell people your fears, communicate, or just share your highs or lows.
Yeah.
Open the Bible together. Again, keeping it simple and organic and human versus this rat race. I think that's part of the next wave. You're going to see more and more of that spring up.
I'm laughing because it kind of reminds me of high school a little bit.
What?
How they're at lunch, there were like pods of groups of people, right? That you hung out with.
The cute girls hung out with each other. The jocks hung out with the geeks.
So, I mean, that can kind of backfire too, right? Like they're going to be, do you think house churches could become very cliquey?
I think a lot of churches are cliquey. That's the problem.
Yeah, but do you think more so?
Could be, yeah.
At a small setting where you're going to, because I was looking at a church or just the church website the other day, and they started house church model, and they had they just launched 20 different locations, and more people, whoever just wanted to host one, they could have one in their city, and they had over like 20 cities.
Yeah.
So it's like, even though let's say I live in one city, but I don't like the group, I mean, what is that? How does that look like?
Yeah, I think going back to that, you could stick to your own tribe. And I think during the pandemic,
but do we need that many? Do we need that many groups? Why are there three? What if there's three churches, three house churches in the same city? Is that necessary?
Just to understand, is each sub church is like a clique?
Yeah.
Where it's like, all right, we're like the fishing group.
But they're all connected to the same main
yeah
channel, which is the church.
So that's why I love the church we're currently serving. We're called Church for the Nations because our mission is to be multi-generational and multi-ethnic. And I think the only way we pull that off is a work of God. Otherwise, we're very worldly because you stick to your own tribe, you stick to your own belief systems. So we're united and firm in our belief in Christ, but we're able to have different cultures, different types of people, different political even positions, and different theological positions. But we're actually united because we have the same Holy Spirit residing in us. And only if it's a work of the Spirit do we know it's a legitimate group. But yeah, I think that clickiness of churches have always been happening.
Yeah.
That's something new. It's just the types of it is there. But I think that's important too because it goes back to that initial problem people have with social media selection. They just hear their own, they only hear their own perspective.
Yeah.
And then they become dogmatic and legalistic about it versus using technology to learn about all the different opinions there could be. And it depends on who's using it. But I think more often than not, people are just sticking to their own belief system because it's safer, it's more comfortable.
Right.
And it's actually not what Christianity should be about. It should be the opposite. Christianity should call you into the world to be light in dark places and to be the salt of the earth, not to just be scared in your little Christian bubble and just have a fear-based culture being emerged. And that's weird. That's just weird. It doesn't look like Jesus at all. But that's common too. But again, these ideas are nothing new. It's just how they're manifesting is new because of the technologies and the world we live in. Nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
Jabe, is anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Do you think that eventually there's a pushback to it?
I think it's happening.
Yeah.
Because you talked about VR and stuff like that. I feel like VR has tried many times. Like it's readily available for the mass market. Pretty easy. Like just you can buy the Oculus,
right?
The Quest 2,
right?
Just it's all in one. You put it on.
But it might not be something our generation's comfortable with, but our kids' generation, they could be earlier adopters to it, and it becomes second nature to them. You know,
I just feel like, because I feel like the current like millennial and Gen Zers or whatever they are, they could. A lot of people were excited for it, but it just never really clicks.
Yeah. I think there needs to be more of a incentive besides like right now, just video games and other things. But at the end of the day, I think it might not be that. It might be something else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Because I have a VR set and it's like, it's novel, but after a while it's like, it's just, and then there's like, sometimes it's just, there's certain programs that just, you get like motion sickness and
some people will have can't handle it.
Granted, you can if you work through it, you can get over it.
But if it's VR or something else, it's gonna be something else. I mean, ChatGPT is definitely something else.
Yeah, I think I want like because everyone kind of like got more aware of what VR or AR is with the new Apple Vision thing or whatever they're calling it. And a lot of people were very, very opinionated on like what it could be and just apps everywhere in your face. And I feel like people were a little bit more resistant to the idea of just like it's like, it's on my phone. Why on earth do I want it in my face?
Right. And I hope there's a counter reaction to that, but we'll see. But it's like funny that I love the cartoons where it's like our generation, at least we love playing outside, come back in. Now it's the other way. Go get outside, you know? Yeah. So all this is interesting. And I think whatever the younger generation is going to have, we're going to be the older generation soon.
Yeah.
Where we're going to be like, we've learned this way. This is what life is like without AI. This is what life is like without VR tech in your face all the time. So
there's going to be also there's this instant gratification.
Right.
And they're constantly wanting change and something new because they're bored. So I think there's just going to be, but we'll see what it's going to turn into. Maybe it'll just go back to the old school way of doing.
So whenever new technologies are introduced,
cycle, right?
Yeah, whenever new technologies are introduced, there's usually a throwback to something that was already like lost in the past. And I think
like how vinyl came back.
Yeah, exactly. And that collective experience of of listening to music together versus just listening by yourself.
Yeah.
So all these are factors. But yeah, I mean, I think we could talk about these for days, but I think it's just important to know that if it's going to be true, it'll last regardless of what technological revolution happens. And I think modeling is important. And I think we shouldn't be fearful of technology, but utilize technology. Again, the nuclear energy could be used to generate electricity and to create this podcast, or it could be used to destroy humanity with a nuclear weapon. Technology is always neutral, but really who's using it and why are they using it? That's where good and evil is ultimately revealed. And I think that's always something we need to be aware of, just to make sure that with all these technologies, is it being used to serve people, or is it used for selfish motivations and destruction, or is it meant to build people up? Well, yeah. I think you want to wrap this up?
Yeah. Thank you all for listening today to Christ and Coffee. Make sure to like, subscribe, tune in every week. Every Wednesday, we have a brand new episode. And see you soon.
Great job. All right. Thanks, everyone.